Hi, so my name's Caitlin, and today I'm going to be talking about chemicals in food packaging. Um, so let's get started. Okay, to begin, food packaging is obviously a regularly used product and not something many think of as being potentially harmful to their health. However, according to environmental health, food contact chemicals, FCCs, are a cause for concern amongst the public's health due to a lack of testing on potentially toxic chemicals used. These are also known as PFAs, and they were created to really make food packaging more simple. So, when you think of like to-go containers, Chinese food containers, to-go salad containers, and all of these packagings are made of plastic. Um, so as pretty much just stated, the use of plastic was known as a game changer in manufacturing. However, it was quickly realized that the simplicity of these chemicals came with harmful side effects, some not even explored yet. As we will talk about, many of them have not been explored, and that's a main issue with these chemicals, and why many are concerned is because of the lack of research. People just don't know what to think. So yeah. Okay. So Roy Plunkett, who was a scientist, discovered per and polyfluoroalkyl substances, also known as PFAs. They are a new type of chemical with a strong bond. PFAs are known as forever chemicals and can be found in many packaging used at major grocery stores and chain restaurants. So when you think of pretty much anything that is that semi-sticky material on packaging, so maybe what holds together the bottom of a paper bag at a fast food place, or the to-go containers at like a Whole Foods market, um, where basically it's supposed to have this strong bond to keep uh these plastics together, but in reality, um, they are seeping into foods, and that was not known until very recently. So they are nicknamed forever chemicals because of how strong the bond created by them holds. This is why they work well with many to-go products used at chain restaurants such as McDonald's, and they're sold at grocery stores. Chemicals in food packaging go through a process known as migration that effectively allows the chemicals to be absorbed into the product. So migration is basically a scientific process, I guess, with chemicals, where the chemicals migrate from their original, the food packaging onto the food. Unfortunately, this wasn't known until very recently. People like Roy Plunkett claimed and thought that it was completely safe. It couldn't seep through or migrate onto food, but as we'll talk about, that was not the case. So according to Justin Boucher, who's an environmental engineer at the Food Packaging Forum, we know that these substances migrate into food you eat, says Justin Boucher, an environmental engineer at the Food Packaging Forum, a nonprofit research organization based in Switzerland. It's clear in direct exposure. That's especially likely when food is fatty, salty, or acidic, according to a 2021 review in the journal Foods. Some research even suggests that PFA levels are higher in people who regularly eat out. So this is obviously a cause for concern, especially since the pandemic, since eating out and food packaging was so much more common. Who knows what we were really putting in our body at that time. Food packaging has become so much more creative because of things like the pandemic, and food delivery, where you need food to be secure. You need to be sure that the packaging is, you know, works very well and can travel. So unfortunately, things like PFAs do come in handy because they are so strong. and they can hold together things so well, but unfortunately, as we'll learn, the research just isn't there for us to safely put these chemicals in our body, since we really don't know what they are. So, yeah. Okay. So part two, we're moving on to the argument. According to Dr. Martin Mulvihill, a researcher and advisor at Berkeley, BPA, polyester, and PFAs are probably the biggest concerns that consumers are likely to run into on a regular basis. Avoid BPA by avoiding canned goods and cash register receipts. To avoid polyester, stay away from styrofoam containers as well as any plastic with the number 6, including coffee cup lids and many plastic clamshells. Avoid nonstick pans, microwave popcorn, and paper-to-go containers will help protect you from PFAs. Many do not realize food and packaging are interacting when touching, and as stated, they can have a variety of different reactions. So as just mentioned by Dr. Mulvihill, there are PFAs in so many things. Canned goods, so if you go and get a soup, the plastic or the sticky material that holds the paper, label onto the can, that is BPA, cash register receipts, obviously the ink and then the glue. We've already known that styrofoam is bad for the environment, but after doing this project and learning that it can also be harmful to my body, especially, that should have kind of been an inkling since you can't microwave styrofoam. There has to be like something wrong with it, but it is very concerning to learn that these products that we rely so heavily on, like plastic, to-go containers, I know me personally, I use them pretty much every day, whether it's if I'm on campus all day or if I'm working, babysitting, whatever. And unfortunately, I do drink a lot of coffee, so I definitely consume a good amount of plastic through Dunkin' Donuts, which was very concerning to learn through this project. So I completely understand the argument against these. I think anything where the research isn't there, it probably just should not be used as regularly as these PFAs are being used. While I do understand the argument for the other side, for the convenience and especially for economic reasons, they are very cheap to produce and easy. As we know, especially styrofoam. Many places use styrofoam because of how accessible and cheap it's manufactured. But as we will learn, cheapness does not always mean better. We don't know what these chemicals are, and it's just scary to put them in our bodies without having a full understanding, especially for these scientists to allow it without having a full understanding is very scary. Which is why we'll talk about the government isn't really doing much because it's kind of, they care more about money, which is the other side of this argument. As long as the manufacturing prices stay down, I don't see it changing much. So yeah. Okay, moving on. According to the CDC, 12 PFAs have been detected in humans' bloodstream so far. There are many dangers to PFAs, including they can move in soil or water, they do not break down in the environment, and they can harm fish and wildlife. Since they're harmful, scientists are aiming to move away from plastic and search for safer alternatives for the public. Not only this, but the CDC has also reported that PFAs persist in the environment and exposure in people can occur by consuming PFAs, contaminated water or food. Exposure may happen by using products that contain PFAs. So basically, as previously stated, PFAs can be in pretty much any food packaging you could think of. And not only this, obviously, people litter and pollution is a huge problem. So when these plastic containers eventually end up in water, they're damaging our wildlife and our ocean life, which is really unfortunate because they didn't do anything. Um, so yeah, this kind of seems like a vicious cycle, and I was realizing that as I was researching that there really seems to be no benefits to these PFAs besides the money factor for obviously companies. But when it comes to the health of the general public as well as the health of our environment, there's really no benefits at all. Okay, continuing. The CDC says human health effects from exposure to low environmental level PFAs are uncertain. Um, so this is basically just saying that it's only been studied on animals, but so far it's indicating that it can affect reproduction, thyroid function, the immune system, and injure the liver. Um, and obviously this is concerning because this is just on small animals. So there's really no way to tell what it's doing to us since we are actually consuming the PFAs compared to animals who are just being exposed to them. We are using the food packaging. So it's very scary to learn this. And I think that's why the biggest concern should be research at this point. For PFAs, I think the public does have a right to know what they are. If they did the research to discover the PFAs, they should follow through all the way and find the downsides and the side effects and the causes for concerns. So yeah. Okay, so now I just have a short video that I'm gonna play, and yeah. Oh no.
In the environment that might contribute to some pretty frightening stuff like obesity, breast cancer, thyroid issues, and they seem to lurk everywhere in pesticides, cosmetics, and especially plastic packaging. In light of this, it's understandable to start panicking. But before you do, let's hear what molecular biologist Bruce Bloomberg has to say on the subject. He's been studying the link between synthetic chemicals and obesity for around 15 years. So he might be able to give us a better idea of what's really going on and what to do about it. Bad news is, Bloomberg confirmed that, yep, we're surrounded by these chemicals. One of the most well-known is BPA, or bisphenol A, which shows up in water bottles, cans, milk cartons, and more.
You get them from thermal paper receipts. Like I have these receipts from a recent trip. All of these things are coated with bisphenol A. And it goes right into your skin.
BPA has been making headlines for years about whether or not it's harming us. And while FDA-funded and independent studies have conflicting conclusions, the bigger heart of the issue is this: BPA is hard to get away from because it's a key building block in the tough, clear, flexible plastic called polycarbonate. And that proximity to food is what concerns scientists like Bloomberg.
You don't want to store food in plastics because some fraction of those plastics will leach into your food.
The BPA molecules that make up plastic are bound together by what's called an ester bond, which is extremely sensitive to heat. So when you heat up your food in plastic, that heat breaks some of the bonds, releasing the chemicals into your food. A survey by the CDC of 2,517 people estimated that over 90% urine, and BPA isn't alone. Phthalates, which make plastic flexible, can also leach into food when heated. And reviews of hundreds of studies have linked BPA and phthalates to heart disease, obesity, and type 2 diabetes. Not to mention, a 2015 review linked phthalates with impaired neurological development in children, which in 2018 prompted the American Academy of Pediatrics to announce that families should avoid plastic food containers entirely. And other studies on animals like mice and monkeys have shown that these chemicals can lead to problems in the lungs, brains, and reproductive organs. This is about the time someone like me would probably panic. But there are ways you can avoid these chemicals. Bloomberg suggests it's best to just stick to heating your food in anything but plastic. Now, quick aside, BPA-free plastic containers aren't the answer because research suggests that BPS and BPF, the most common replacements for BPA, might have similar effects on your body. Instead, opt for replacements like ceramic or glass containers.
You have to do the best you can, and it makes sense to me to do the things that give you the most return for the least effort.
And here's the best part. Once you reduce exposure, those chemicals slowly leave your body. As Bloomberg says, they're stored in fat cells, which eventually die and ultimately leave your system.
Don't stress about it, right? Do your best and make conscious choices to improve things.
Okay. Sorry. So after watching that video, I definitely grew even more concerned because I don't know about anyone else, but I do heat my food up in the microwave very often, and not very often will I transfer it to a regular plate because I don't want to wash it. And then not only that, I then would use a paper plate, which then to find out that paper plates are also coated in this harmful chemical that we're then heating up, which apparently only makes it worse. So that's very scary because most of these plastic packaging are advertised as microwave safe and microwave friendly. And as we learned from Dr. Bloomberg, this is not always the case. So yeah.
There's been a lot of buzz
Oh,
that
no. Don't play again. Okay. So chemicals in food packaging, political, clinical, societal, and cultural factors. According to the FDA, the four main groups of PFAs and what people should look out for are PFAs that are authorized to use in contact with food. Generally, they fall into four applications. So nonstick cookware. So basically anything that says nonstick advertised as, nonstick, you don't have to use anything. That's because they already coat it in a chemical. So you are probably better off just using whatever spray oil, which is people think is not healthy. You're probably better off using that than a nonstick pan because it's not really nonstick, it's just coated in a chemical. So basically anything, gaskets, O-rings. So gaskets are basically like a hardware piece, a part of manufacturing products, same with O-rings. So if you think of anything that creates like packaging basically, or factories, so I'm trying to explain, like when they create the labels and things like that, it's a part of the machine that also contains PFAs. So even in the process of being created, they are still having, like, they still contain chemicals. It can also be a part of things you use to make food. So like ice cream machines, any little piece you could think of that's a part of some sort of machine probably is covered in a PFA. Processing aids, so manufacturing other food contact polymers to reduce buildup on manufacturing equipment. So this is basically any kind of, I guess, lubricant is the right word, used to kind of reduce the rust or gunk around a machine that contains harmful chemicals that is then being used to manufacture products that we are using. Paper, food packaging, which is what we've been talking about mostly, which is fast food wrappers. So grease proofing, basically when you get like a nice burger, a good quality burger, and it's in that kind of fancy aluminum foil that feels kind of greasy, even though it's not, that's covered in PFA. Microwave popcorn bag. So when you feel a microwave popcorn bag, you can feel that kind of almost greasy feeling, even though there's nothing on it. That's because it's coated in PFA. Take out paperboard containers and pet food bags to prevent oil and grease from foods from leaking through the packaging. So basically these things that were made to make life easier from leaking, things like that, could be harming us in way bigger ways, and I would rather deal with the oil and grease. So since the FDA is saying what should be looked out for, it can be assumed that not much is being done, because they're saving money through it. So the FDA is releasing whatever information they can, but in reality, without the funding to do the research, there's nothing really anyone can do. A major cause for concern is the fact that they're just harmful plastics being put into the world, more harmful plastics being put into the world. As we stated before, this is kind of just a vicious cycle because these products contain harmful PFAs that we're consuming, but not only this, people are polluting these harmful PFAs into our ocean, into our land, to our animals, to our environment, and it's just an all-around horrible situation because everyone is being affected by it, but we really don't know how because the research isn't there. So it's kind of a guessing game. We just know that it's not good. Also, food packaging is something that is used universally. Kids use food packaging in school lunches. Adults use food packaging for anything. And not many people know about this issue. Many people see that it says microwave friendly and they think, great, I don't have to dirty a plate. So I think it's very unfair that issues like this aren't being researched and showcased because it's something that's so regularly used. Another main cause for concern is the lack of research and data available. You can assume they're harmful just based off of previous research and what we know so far, and as what Dr. Bloomberg stated, we know BPAs are harmful based off research, but as long as the funding isn't there for research, we really won't know, which is scary because there's nothing we can really do at this point. Reports are being done, and there are obviously foundations, or I guess organizations to help. But when it comes to government intervention, there isn't really a national concern for it just yet. The FDA has said they are going to look into the use of PFAS further, but as of right now, it hasn't been made a public health concern. They're still used very regularly, and yeah, that is very concerning. So this is just some examples of things that have PFAs, BPAs, harmful chemicals in them, things we use all the time. So if you look at the soda bottle, it's the pretty much every aspect of the soda bottle actually, but if you think of what sticks the label on, what keeps the cap on, things like that. The sandwich container is pretty much all made of plastic, so that's not good in general. Chip bags, what is used to seal the bag all around, which is then contained into the bag, so who knows? That also says heavy metals, which is scary. Condiment packets, which is also very scary because those are used so often, heavy metals in a very small container, closed, who knows what we're really putting into our bodies. So yeah, here's another example on the side of just some things that use PFAs, pretty much anything you could think of at fast food because they want to maintain the grease, so they cover it in all these chemicals to try to help, but in reality, even you would think the Big Mac one wouldn't, but still. So yeah, if PFAs are the best option for food packaging, research for safer alternatives should be top priority. And another idea that has been said by many is to move away from plastic towards glass options. It is more expensive and obviously concerned because it can break, but there are options out there. It's not too much more expensive. And yeah, they can be microwaved safely, and yeah. Another action to be taken would be to create materials made of reusable materials, which is already seen to be made by manufacturers like NSERC. So I've actually seen these materials. If you've ever been to Finn's, they have one in Bradley Beach, Seagirt, Point Pleasant. They use these reusable containers where they're made of plastics that have already been taken from the environment. So unfortunately, I've only ever really seen those used at small businesses like that, or Surf Taco, I think, uses them too. But if those had a bigger outreach and maybe bigger manufacturers, I feel like that could be a really good solution because they basically look the same, in my opinion. They do the same thing, and I feel like that's a really great alternative. And if it is more expensive to manufacture, I feel like our health should be a bigger concern than that, because there's already so many other ways our health is being damaged. I feel like we should try to do what we can. So various companies have announced they will look into their use of PFAs, including Whole Foods, Cava, Burger King, Chick-fil-A, McDonald's. They all plan to phase them out by 2025. Panera and Chipotle said their goal was to not use packaging with intentionally added PFAs. Sweetgreen is trying, but even said that PFAs are a widespread problem in our present everyday life, from tap water to air to soil. So it's pretty much, even these companies know, like, they're saying, hey, we're trying, but they're everywhere. So I feel like if the research was just done in the first place and we knew that these were harmful, then this wouldn't be such a widespread problem. But it was created and people ran with it because it was cheap and it worked and it was making things easy to manufacture. And now it's a huge widespread problem that we don't even have the funding to research. So yeah. So this is part 5, the summary, or part 4, summary conclusions. So according to our textbook, following a healthy eating pattern across the lifespan, all food and beverage choices matter. Choose a healthy eating pattern at an appropriate calorie level to help achieve and maintain a healthy body weight, support nutrient adequacy, and reduce the risk of chronic disease. So this is just a general rule or guideline that was in our book for nutrition, but I feel like this can't even be followed at this point in our world because we really don't know what we're putting into our bodies. Taking calories out of it, we don't know the calories of anything, first of all, when we eat out, because we don't know what's being added into our foods. But then when it comes to packaging, we also don't know what's being added to those. So we really have no idea what we're putting into our body. And as much as you could say, well, you could just make your own food, as we learned, there's also PFAs in many options to get at the grocery store, including soda cans or soda bottles, chips, cans, anything you could think of, nonstick pans. So it is very scary because even if you try to get away from it, it seems like it's kind of everywhere. So the most important action is to create safer food packaging, in my opinion, until further research can be done. So I think glass options is a great alternative if you're looking for to-go containers or microwave safe options. And then if you are a restaurant, I think the to-go containers made of reusable plastics are a really great option because they work just the same, and they actually help our environment instead of hinder. So, conclusion. Overall, the use of PFAs in packaging, that's spelled wrong, I'm very sorry. Packagings used by grocery and restaurant chains is an infringement on the citizens of the United States' rights. We are being fed harmful chemicals and we're not even made aware. There's nowhere when looking on PFA containing packaging that states all of the health risks that are unknown, or even that the research isn't known. It should say we don't know what this is, something. Many had to do their own research to learn what they have been putting into their bodies, and as stated before, there isn't really much being done so far when it comes to ethical considerations and actions. There are organizations that look into the use of these chemicals and are concerned, such as the Toxic Free Future and Safer Chemicals Happier Families. They did reports and they found harmful levels of PFAs in 2/3 of fast food packaging containers. And that led to a large response from many fast food chains, but unfortunately, those are not funded by anything other than the people involved in fundraising and stuff like that. So until there's really government action and government funded research into these PFAs, besides the little that's being done now, obviously the government, they're not doing absolutely nothing, but it's not much. So yeah, until the full research is done, I just don't think it's fair for us to continue to put these harmful chemicals into our body. And I feel like these safer alternatives, if available, are really great options. And I really hope that this is one issue that we can hopefully get a hold on, because since there are so many other environmental issues in the world, it's really scary to think that even the littlest things like your food packaging is not only hurting your health, but also the environment. So yeah, thank you for listening, and that's it.